Hi, in the beginning I didn't know if I was going to make this into a tutorial because I wasn't sure that I like the end result, but I think it's alright. It's much more saturated that you can see on the video, but if you use the materials that I recommend, I guess it's just going to turn out nicely. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I do not like this new trend, the modern style of watercolor where it's highly saturated and very high. There is a lot of contrast and between light and dark. And what I promised that I would show you how how it looked like if I painted in that style. So I guess this video is going to be about that, and that's another reason why I wanted to share this tutorial with you, just to show you how I would create in this modern style, in this modern way of painting with watercolor. So using Escoda Perla size 10 brush, I'm going to wet the face of the mummy, and we are just going to paint wet on wet. And by the way, I did scan the outline, so if you are unsure or if you don't know that you will like the end result of your sketching, or if you are not an experienced sketcher if you're not experienced in sketching out or drawing outlines, I have that for you. You can download it, print it on watercolor paper, and then you just have to fill it out following my tutorial or however you like it. So I'm heading on wet and using Daniel Smith Kindred Coral. You can use any other brand as well. I'm just going to paint the face of the mummy, and it's going to be a peachy pinky color. And then of course you need to, or I need to smudge it out so that it's not so harsh, especially around the edges. And then using the mixture of yellow ochre, I use Winsor Newton here and quinacridone coral. I'm just going to paint the rest of the face of the mummy. So the first thing is that there's going to be a lot of shadow where mom's face meets the child's face. So I wouldn't mind putting a lot of shadows there right now, but I think I'm just going to do that later on. And the other thing is that I also paint the hair portion of the mummy. You will see me do this in a lot of tutorials, and the reason for that is because it sometimes can look very awkward when you paint the hair portion of the mummy, and it's a different color. It's a very different color from her face, and it looks odd. And by doing this, by painting the face color into the hair color, I'm just trying to create a sense of, unity, that even below her hair, her color is skin color, obviously. So now I'm just painting the mummy's neck and her décolletage, where her skin shows through the shirt, sorry. It's not a t-shirt, it's a long shirt. And she wears a necklace with which the child is playing with, or he's interested in. So that's something to be mindful and leave that out of the painting. so that when you give its original color or the color you want it to be, it's going to be more bright and it's going to be very beautiful. So I just saw that in my previous illustrations I used to paint skin color with browns and ochres, and not yellow ochre but more like a brownish reddish ochre, and it didn't come out very nicely in printing. So I highly recommend using yellow ochre with quinacridone coral, so it's more of a yellowish reddish tint rather than brownish. That's just going to look way better. So I'm just repainting the mom's face and skin with more saturated color, and right now you see that her face is pretty red and pretty obvious. That's going to change a lot, and the reason for that is because the rest of the painting is white right now, and as we are going to move on with different colors and shades, the face color of the mummy is going to recede a lot throughout our painting. And in continuation with the face, I'm going to wet the hair area and just put on some base colors, which I loved a lot. And to be honest, if I were to paint in my usual style, wet on wet, I would be very happy with that result, and I would just put 2 or 3 more layers on top of it with the same colors but more intensely, and I would call it a day. That was very beautiful. I was at least very happy with it, but that's not today's task, so I have to change that. I will change that quite a lot, and I will go on with a lot of saturated colors and paint hair first by sections, and then later on by even by strings, or how you call it, hair by hair, one by one. But right now I'm going on with yellow ochre and just painting wet on wet and giving the hair some dimensions, and also starting to determine out where the hair will fall off her shoulder. So her hair will naturally fall down beside her face, and then it will go behind her back. And I need to also outline or map out how that's going to be, how that's going to happen. And of course, yellow ochre is more for blonde hair. You can go in with reds, you can go in with browns or even black, but I wouldn't use black even for black hair. I would use probably indigo for black hair and browns for brown. So yeah, you can choose any different colors. The technique is going to be the same. Just going section by section, mapping out where you want your shadows and your highlights to be, and how you want the hair to fall around the lady's face. And if you're a first time watcher, then I'm putting on a glove that is called, you can type into Amazon, artist glove, and it covers my small and my ring finger, and it protects the paint and protects me from smudging the painting that I'm just painting. I still have to lift my hand because my painting is still wet, but especially later when I'm doing the fine details, it comes in handy, and it helps so much to have that on so that my painting doesn't smudge. Even though I use high quality watercolor paints, I still need it. Like my hand is still oily naturally, so I just need this to protect my painting from me. And as you can see on the left hand side, I have a bunch of napkins. I don't like to use towels, rags, whatever, because even when it says lint free, it still has some lint. It collects it from the air, it collects it from other materials, so if you wash it once or twice, it will already show and have some lint. So this is my best option to have napkins. It doesn't have any lint and it's a one-time use, and it's kind of, I think it is eco-friendly. I am not sure, not 100% sure, but I think that napkins and tissues are okay. They are not plastic, so that's why I use these. On the right hand side you can see a tissue. That's for lifting up colors. So if I make a mistake or if I want to lift the colors for any other reason while my painting is still wet, it's very useful to have a tissue at hand, so you can use that immediately. You don't need to search for it and then the painting starts to dry, but you should have it next to your painting. So by now I've switched from yellow ochre to raw umber, and I'm doing the same thing, just determining the highlights and the shadows. And now we are already moving on to the shirt area. And if I were to use my original technique that I love, which is wet on wet, I would be wetting the whole t-shirt of the mommy. But right now you can see me just going loosely and determining where I want my shadowed areas to be, and putting on ever so lightly indigo. And I used indigo by White Nights because White Nights is a very cheap, very affordable brand, and indigo color comes out very, very beautifully, and I think it's a very high quality even though it is a cheaper brand. So we are going to keep moving and keep putting on more saturated indigo color, but very carefully, because indigo is actually a really dark color. It is almost black when you use it really saturated. It kind of looks black, especially when printing. So just use a very diluted layer first and then go a little darker each time. So as you can see, the light comes from the left hand side, from your left hand side, and so I naturally want to cover the right edge of the clothes, as you can see me doing now. So what I'm doing is I'm mapping out the arm of the mummy so that her right hand side is more shadowed and her left hand side is highlighted. And we are going to use quite a dark indigo for the darkest areas, and we are going to leave the highlighted areas completely blank. So that's the highly saturated way of painting. This is a modern technique. I mean, they used to do it like hundreds of years ago even, but it wasn't quite so contrasty. There was not such a big difference between light and shadow. So in that sense, it's quite a modern trend, just like in photographs. When you see people's Instagram or when you see professional photos, it's always saturated, it's always very highlighted, so it always has kind of like a large contrast between light and shadow. And as you can see it here, I'm just adding more and more saturated indigo to the left hand side of the lady, and maybe even now you can kind of see how her arm is going, but it's going to be so much more visible when the whole body is painted. And now that I'm adding like highly saturated indigo, you might be able to see what I'm talking about when I say that it is almost black. It looks kind of like black, but with a little bit of a blue tint. It's very beautiful. It's one of my favorite colors, especially for creating shadows. And I also love dioxazine purple or dioxazine purple. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. So the lines that I'm adding now, they are the creases of the clothes. So when you look at it in the end, you can kind of imagine or even see how her dress is going to crease. And after I'm happy with even the bottom portion of her arm, I'm just going to add some middle layers so that it still is not such a sharp difference between light and shadow, but there should be something in the middle, like your middle tones. So if you don't know what I mean by highly saturated, it depends on the amount of water you add to watercolor. So watercolor needs water to be activated, and the more water you add, the lighter the color will be. So naturally, if you just use a very small amount of water and a lot of paint, that's going to be highly saturated, and it's going to be a highly pigmented and darker color. And that's what I mean by that. And now it's time to do the bottom portion of her dress. Just going to leave some colors before that. And then I'm going to paint the back portion. And that's kind of like a darker area. So for now, I'm just going to cover it with a middle tone, a single layer of indigo. So that means maybe grabbing half portion of water and half portion of indigo color. You can see me just doing right now. That is not really dark and it's not very light either. And I'm going to completely cover this back portion. And then we need to start thinking about where else is her clothes going to be shadowed. So naturally the light comes from the left hand side, then the baby should cast some shadows over to her dress. So we are just going to cover that area as well, so that it looks more natural, and you can also already see where her dress is going to end and where the baby is going to start. So for now we are just going to add a very light diluted layer and then move on to where the baby's face is, but still where her mom's dress is. We are still going in with indigo as to frame the child. And if you paint along with me and you look at your painting or mine right now, you can kind of see how her dress is going to look like. Not dress, but maybe shirt. And it's a very strong contrasty look. And what we will continue to do throughout the painting is try to match that kind of harsh contrast throughout the whole painting. And if you manage to create a balance between light and shadow, it's going to turn out beautifully. So just be careful now and try to add color layer by layer. That's, I think, the most important thing is to build up your work. Go from light to dark and slowly, and eventually you will get there. You will see what you want to achieve, and it will be beautiful. So now we are going around the baby's face, but still on the left side we are going to paint mom's dress so that to frame the baby's face. And it's very dark, it's one of the darkest areas, but still we are going in with some mid-tones first so that to carefully outline the baby's face and the mom's neck area, because we want all of the focus to be there on the mom's and the baby's face. So sorry, you can see my face there, my head there, because I'm so concentrated and I want to lean closer just to get it right. And for now, you can go in with the same color, same shadow, same layer. You don't need to be focusing on adding highlights and shadows right now, because this is a pretty dark area. And what we will do later on is just continue to build up color towards the neck of the mom, because that's going to be the darkest area. And when you are happy with your first layer, you can go in with the second one, adding more color and just slowly fading it out as you reach the bottom of this portion of like where the baby's chin is or mouth is. I suggest using the tip of the brush here because you wanna get it right. You want a straight line throughout the whole area. The mom's chin, the baby's face, and the mom's neckline. It all should be very beautifully worked out. So it's much easier to use. And this is quite a small area as well where you want this shadowed neckline. So it makes it so much easier if you use the tip of your brush. And the style we are painting in right now is called expressionist, which means that you kind of just give the feeling of where the shirt is, where the baby's face is. Of course, we are going to strongly outline the mom's and the baby's face, but the rest, the background, the clothes, are going to be not a very, I don't know how to say, not a very outline, not a very obvious part, naturally, because we created such a strong highlight and shadow. So when someone looks at the painting, they wouldn't know where to look, because you created, or we created, so many areas where there is a strong contrast. So we need to create a feeling, and we need to create a focal point of the painting. And by giving the mom and the child the most outline, the most precise shape, that's going to make the focus of the eye. That's going to create the focus. And so after we are done with mom's dress, we are going to move on to the child's clothes, her shirt, his or her shirt. And I'm using Quinacridone Burnt Orange here by Daniel Smith. And just starting out starting to map out the belly of the baby. And then, just like we did with Mommy, we are going to create shadows and highlights with the most saturated color being on the right hand side of our painting and the contrast being, the highlights being on the left hand side. However, we also need to consider Mom's hand, which is going to cast a shadow on the baby's clothes, and that's going to be a shadowed area as well. So here, as you will see in a second, I'm a little bit more brave with my colors. I'm going to add, for the first layer, even more saturated burnt orange. And the reason for that is because we determined our highlights and shadows already with Mom's dress. So that's our baseline. We know how it's going to look like, and we need to match the baby's clothes as well, so that it looks like they belong in the same picture. So the shadowed areas are very saturated and the highlights just kept white. And now you can see how I am just painting around Mom's fingers. Leaving little to no highlights, just there where the baby's body is. Moving on to the arms, we are going to paint creases, and it's kind of my weak point, to be honest. I still need to work very hard on painting fabric, how to paint fabric, but my suggestion is just to look for clothes on photos, how they crease, how they look like. For this painting, I looked at a photo and I tried to copy how her or his or her clothes folded, and where the highlights were and where the shadows were, and I just kept building up my colors. So here I'm much more careful because it's not an easy job to paint fabric actually. But also don't be very scared to do an experiment, because this is, as I said, an expressionist painting. So we are just giving off a feeling of where the clothes are and how they fold, and our main focal area is going to be the mom's and the child's face, just like in my other baby mommy paintings, but in a different style. And now that I have my outlines and I determined where I want my shadows, I'm going to go in with a deeper orange, a more saturated orange shade, and creating small creases, small lines wherever I saw it, and just building up my painting and my highlights and shadows essentially. And I was so super excited painting this painting, creating this new style. So far I have only seen how people are doing this, but I never tried it, so I was very excited throughout this whole video, and I was very happy with the end result. So I might be doing more paintings like this in the future, but this is not my style. It's not how I usually paint, but I loved the end result and I thought it was very beautiful. So if you would like to see me doing more paintings in this style, just let me know in the comments and I will be happy to oblige. I will be happy to paint more paintings with this style. And as you can see on my painting now, I determined where my shadows are. I used highly saturated colors. Now I'm using mid-tones to soften the edges. This is a very important step that I still need to be working on, and I still need to be more, I think, brave in a sense of creating really strong shadows and softly blending them out into completely white. So you can see me now still building up darker and darker shadows of the same color, quinacridone burnt orange, and the reason for that is because when I added my midtones, I just started to see that the mom's dress were much more highly saturated. There was much more difference between highlights and shadows than the baby's dress. And I didn't want the mom's dress to pull away from the child's dress. I intended to use blue, which is a cool tone for mom's dress, and orange, which is a warm color for the baby's dress, so that the baby is more in focus and his or her action, which is that she is playing with mom's necklace. Now that I'm happy with the arm, I need to go back to the body of the baby and adding more saturated colors to the shadows around mom's fingers. And I'm still using the Escoda brush, by the way, it's size 10, but only the pointy end of it, so I'm not putting any pressure on the body. And it's important to continue to keep cleaning up and drying your wet brush. So when you use highly saturated colors, it should be damp and not dripping wet. Because if you use too much water, then the blooms start to appear on your painting and it's going to ruin your whole painting, and I'm sure you don't want that. I didn't want that anyway, but some people love blooms and can work with them very nicely. I'm still in the process of learning them, and I definitely didn't want any in my painting here. So next I'm going to use size 0 by Escoda Perla. It's a contour brush, and I'm going to start a long way of painting mom's hair. It's going to be a really long journey, but I think it's going to be very worthwhile. Using yellow ochre and this contour brush, I'm going to map out the sections of her hair, whatever style I think right now. Most of the styles anyway that you are going to paint a hair in, you will first need to go section by section, because that's the way hair naturally falls. You don't just start out painting hair one by one, but first you need to determine how the hair falls around the head. And after you are done with that, you can safely move on to add some more details, and that's what we are going to do, and that's what's going to take a long time. And here I'm mixing 3 different colors: yellow ochre, yellow ochre, raw umber, and Van Dyke brown. And what you need to be mindful is where the hair parts. So on top of your head, you part your hair, especially, women, some men too, and you need to determine where the hair starts to fall on the right and on the left side. So after that, it's going to be so much easier to determine how mom's hair will fall to the right and left hand side of her face. And we are going to use a lot of single strokes, showing how the hair is folding around mom's hair and how it is very messy but also very beautiful. And for the rest of the video, I'm actually just going to repeat the same motion that you see me doing right now, creating sections and then painting strings by string the hair. And I'm using darker colors on the top of her head, and the lightest one is going to be around her eye section, eye area, in line with her eye. And then just making sure that the sections are visible, I'm going to add dark Van Dyke brown to the sections to determine where the sections are, as you will see. But I will stop talking now, so you are free to put on some music or podcast or audio and just paint along with me. And I will see you in part 2. Bye bye.